Hello, and welcome to The Art of Aging, part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from United Church Homes. On this show, we talk about what it means to age in America and in other places around the world with positive and empowering conversations that challenge, encourage, and inspire all to age with abundance. Our guest today is Michael Adams. Michael is the Chief Executive Officer of SAGE, the world's largest and oldest organization dedicated to improving the lives of LGBTQ plus older people. Founded in 1978 and headquartered in New York City, SAGE is a national organization that offers supportive services and consumer resources to LGBTQ plus older people and their caregivers, advocates for public policy changes that address the needs of LGBTQ plus elders, provides education and technical assistance for aging providers and LGBTQ plus community organizations through its National Resource Center on LGBTQ plus aging. And it offers cultural competency training through SAGE Care. With staff located across the country, SAGE also coordinates SAGE Collab, a flexible partnership model with collaborations nationwide. Prior to joining SAGE, Adams was the Director of Education and Public Affairs for Lambda Legal. Prior to that, he spent a decade leading cutting-edge litigation that established new rights for LGBTQ plus people, first as Associate Director of the ACLU's LGBTQ plus project, and then as Deputy Legal Director at Lambda Legal. A graduate of Stanford Law School and Harvard College, Adams has authored numerous publications on an array of LGBTQ plus issues. He has taught law school courses on sexual orientation and gender identity and has served on advisory councils for AARP, Fortune 500 companies, leading universities, and the New York City Department for Aging, among others. Adams is the former chair of the board of directors of the American Society on Aging. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Beth. It's really great to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Absolutely. So let's start with your personal story. How is it that you have come to SAGE, and how long have you been with this organization?
Well, I've been with SAGE for a long time. I'm actually in my 18th year as head of the organization, and I would say that my connection to SAGE, maybe my love affair with SAGE has three chapters to it. When I was quite young, when I was in my early 20s, I was the first time I got exposed to SAGE. I was I was visiting New York City at the Pride Parade when I saw the SAGE bus go by with all the elders on it. And as a young gay man, I just until then had no concept of what it could be like. To be an old gay person. And so seeing all those SAGEs on that bus really caught my attention. And then fast forward, I guess almost 25 years later, back in 2006, when I was contacted about applying to take the job leading the organization. And at that time, I was really drawn to the mission because my grandmother, who I was very close to, was quite sick and was failing. And she had a big family, our family, surrounding her and supporting her, and it was still hard. And it made me think a lot about what it must be like for so many folks in our community aging without that kind of support. And then now, my 18th year on the job, I'm in my 60s now, and the work of SAGE has become much more personal to me as I start to experience my own aging. So it's just a little bit about my kind of sense of connection to to SAGE's cause.
Absolutely. Thanks. I was asked a question recently, and when I gave them what I thought was the correct answer, they're like, no, it stands for something. Does SAGE stand for anything anymore? I think it used to, but I think you've abandoned that association. Is that right?
That's right. It no longer is an acronym. Way back when we got started back in 1978, SAGE stood for Senior Action in a Gay Environment. And we went through a couple of permutations and acronyms. And then probably about 8 or so years ago, we realized that the word SAGE was enough. It's emblematic of really the spirit of our organization, which is that we celebrate and embrace and support the wisdom of LGBTQ plus elders. So now we are just SAGE.
I had the right answer. They didn't like
That's
it,
right.
and
Good.
I'm glad that I was up on that. So, one of the things that's near and dear to our hearts here at United Church Homes is Sage Care. Do you want to talk about that program and how that's going, how it got started, and what are your goals for Sage Care?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sage Care is a program that focuses on providing training and technical assistance and a variety of supports to long-term care providers, elder service providers who are working with LGBTQ plus older adults, as frankly all care providers are, whether they realize it and focus on it or not. And the program emerges out of our experience and conversations with many thousands of elders from LGBTQ plus communities across the country who often have talked with us about how extremely difficult and painful they found the long-term care experience, feeling unwelcomed, unrecognized, not understood. And in fact, many of our elders have told us that they have felt forced to recloset themselves in order to avoid mistreatment or their fear of mistreatment in care. And so we started Sage Care as a training program with the goal of providing care providers with the information, with the tools, with the knowledge that they need to do a good job and a respectful job when working with and providing care with LGBTQ plus older adults. And so we work in partnership with providers. We really are excited as we see providers progress in their knowledge and their understanding of working with elders from our community. And we provide a form of recognition for providers that make this commitment in the form of what we call a credential, a Sage Care credential. So in a nutshell, that's what Sage Care is about.
Yeah, it's been really important for us at United Church Homes, and it's based on a couple of things, but part of it is the percentage of our employees who have participated in the educational opportunities each year. And when we first started more earnestly on this education track and connected with Sage Care, one of our administrators called me up and she said, "Oh my gosh, Beth, everything they're talking about, I can tell you is happening." She could tell.
Right.
She talked about the story about somebody who'd gone back in the closet. She talked about the story of a trans resident and the challenges they were having with staff caring for them. Um, and it was nice to have almost immediate feedback that, yeah, this is really important for us to be aware of in order to care for
That's
these
great. That's
individuals.
great to hear.
Yeah. And then I was really excited when probably 2017, I think, Leading Age had printed an article that said Sage and Leading Age and HRC are going to be developing a long-term care equality index. And at the time, your staff person, Tim Johnston, when I talked to him about it, he's like, yes, and it's not going to happen real fast. So do you want to talk about what is the Long-Term Care Equality Index, and how does, and then we can talk a little bit about how does that connect with Sage Care?
Sure. So the Long-Term Care Equality Index was started several years ago as a project of SAGE and the Human Rights Campaign Foundation, or HRC, with support from Leading Age, to create a series of very transparent and public best practices that can be used to measure how providers are doing in terms of their work and care with and for LGBTQ plus older adults. And it provides a series of measures to score providers on the progress they are making or not making. And so each provider has to sign up and agree to participate in the Long-Term Care Equality Index, and then they self-score on a whole series of measures, and then that self-scoring is then confirmed or verified, and then the scores are shared in a public report that comes out every other year, in which we show what providers across the country are doing in terms of how they are working effectively with LGBTQ plus older adults, where they've made progress, where they still need to make progress. And this is both an educational tool for the providers, but it's also very helpful to LGBTQ plus older adults and their caregivers who need to actually find care facilities for their loved ones, for themselves, and can use the LEI as a consumer guide, essentially, to choose facilities that are really making the effort to provide respectful and welcoming care.
Yeah, I can remember a conversation with one of our chaplains who joined us probably about 2016. And United Church Homes is in covenant with the United Church of Christ, and had already kind of done the work. The board had decided that we would become an open and affirming agency organization. So we already had that distinction within denomination. And this chaplain said to me that he knew that, but he was also interested. And so he had gone to the HRC's website. And at that time, there was the Healthcare Equality Index. Mm-hmm. And he said, "You're not included in the Healthcare Equality Index." And they said, "Well, we don't really fit the Healthcare Equality Index." But he was looking it up not from a standpoint of someone who's seeking care, but as a potential employee. Mm-hmm. And he was looking for that verification that, yeah, we weren't just saying this to say it, but that we were kind of putting our money where our mouth is, making sure that we were, really working on best practices.
Well, that's an interesting point, and I mean that this also the Long-Term Care Equality Index is certainly a good resource for employees who are considering where to work. And I'm glad that you mentioned the Healthcare Equality Index, because the Long-Term Care Equality Index is based on the Healthcare Equality Index, but obviously adapted to the particular circumstances of the elder care sector. And this is why the partnership between SAGE and HRC is so important, because of course SAGE brings all of the experience and expertise of working in the aging sector, and HRC brings that prior experience of these indexes. So when you bring our two organizations together, it's really a great partnership that puts together all the kind of expertise that's needed to have a really great index project.
Yeah, and I had the privilege of serving on that advisory committee.
Yes,
that
thank
helped
you for doing that
in the process. And and I think some of the staff from HRC were a little surprised that they couldn't just easily flip the Healthcare Equality Index. That there are a whole host of differences in both regulations that we have to follow, that hospital systems don't have to follow. In addition to the fact that organizations like United Church Homes, of our 90 communities, 10 maybe have healthcare components to them, and the rest are various components of housing. And so one of the pieces that had to be decided along the way was, okay, we're going to go ahead and include housing, and recognize that there's some questions that just aren't going to be applicable for housing, but still we have our staff and our housing communities participate in it as well.
That's great. And this is why, too, something you referenced earlier, Beth, it took us a while to get the LEI off the ground for just what the reasons you're describing, because we had to work through the particularities of long-term care and elder care. And we really needed to make sure that the index was something that reflected the sector, that reflected the industry, and the providers could relate to and feel that it was reflective of, in fact, the way that they do the work. And so it took us a while to get it off the ground, but we were really, really happy with the launch. We had 200 long-term care providers participate in the initial LEI report last year. That's a great, great start. When the Healthcare Equality Index got started, it had less than 100. Not that we're competitive, but it just gives us a benchmark to know that's a good number to start with.
Well, and the launch was happening during the pandemic, which, was probably one of the roughest periods of history for those of us in long-term care. And I know that also helped slow things down a bit, and continuing to recognize that as we come out of this, there are still some other pretty significant realities that folks who provide long-term care are having to face, because we have not yet fully recovered from the pre-pandemic. So,
for sure.
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So, what is how can we get other folks to participate in? Well, first of all, before you get there, Sage Care and the LEI. So those are two separate processes, and how do you see those working together going forward?
Oh, they very much work together because the the LEI is measuring how effective providers are on a variety of kinds of activities in working effectively and respectfully with LGBTQ plus older adults. Many providers, I would say most providers, have room for improvement because this is a relatively new area of focus for providers, and so the training and technical assistance that Sage Care provides is one means, not the only means, but one means that providers can utilize to build up the experience and the knowledge they need to keep on improving and therefore get a better score on the LEI. So that's how the two are interconnected.
Yeah. And so we started then, as I mentioned, doing Sage Care and then participating in the LEI, and actually that set us up very well. There were still things and still are things that we need to improve. 3 of our communities are not in the leader category. The one thing that we have to do, regardless of everything else that could be improved, is we don't have gender neutral bathrooms in public areas in these buildings, which were built in the 60s with cinder block walls and whatnot. So we're working on trying to figure out how to take care of some of those more substantial infrastructure pieces. But yeah.
But I'm glad you mentioned that, Beth, because within the LEI, there are different levels of accomplishment, basically, or progress that providers have made, leader being one of the categories. And we recognize that it's not possible for every facility, for every provider to be in the same place because there are different sets of circumstances. And some of them are literally physical, is the way a building is built, and there are others as well. So what the LEI does is provide a roadmap to help support providers on their journey to get to the strongest possible place in terms of working effectively and respectfully with LGBTQ plus elders.
So what are your thoughts? What do we need to do to have others participate in both Sage Care and the LEI going forward?
Well, I think, a big part of it is awareness. And this is one of the things that really, fortunately, has changed a great deal, I would say, over the last 10 or 15 years. It used to be that when Sage would reach out and contact an elder care or elder service provider and talk with them about providing training, etc., very often the response that we received was, "Oh, we don't have people like that here." And of course, that wasn't reflective of reality. It may have reflected the reality with the people that they had within their community who were LGBTQ plus were closeted, but it's not that they weren't there. I think we've come a long way in terms of a growing awareness on the part of providers of the existence of LGBTQ plus elders, the fact that we are in every community of every sort across this country. And so now it's really important to continue building awareness of that, but also to build awareness of the fact that there are concrete steps we can take as providers in order to do a better job, and that there are resources out there to support providers in making that progress. And Sage Care and the LAI are among them. And so one of the things that we're really excited about is when we see Sage Care participants and LEI participants publicizing in any way, talking publicly about what they're doing, whether it's at their conferences, whether it's with their stakeholders, whether it's in the media, to keep on putting that spotlight on this work. Because at the end of the day, it's about something really simple. It's simply about ensuring that every human being who happens to be aging as an LGBTQ plus person has the care and support and respect that they need. And so if we keep on building that conversation and building that spotlight and helping providers get the resources they need, we're going to make great progress.
Yeah, we did a workshop for Leading Age Ohio several years ago. And what it was really interesting. There was one woman who attended the workshop. She's the executive director of another community here in Ohio. And afterwards, she came up to me and she said, I came to the workshop and I thought, why am I coming to the workshop? We're doing this in our community. They live in an area that has a very progressive, active college campus. And so a lot of retired professors and folks who are LGBTQ and out. And so they've been doing the education. And she said at the end, she said, okay, now I get it. This isn't something that we can do once and check off.
Yeah.
It is an ongoing practice because of the education that we have to do with staff, and staff leave and staff retire, and then you have new folks coming in, and it is a long-term ongoing commitment.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And that's why it's, we love partnering with many different providers, and we encourage folks to start wherever they can start. But we always emphasize that it is an ongoing commitment. A provider cannot train for 1 year and then stop and think what they've accomplished, what needs to be accomplished, for just the reasons that you said. This is a permanent commitment to continually build the competency and understanding and knowledge of every person that works in that particular community.
The other interesting thing about that workshop is we had a member of the board, we had an administrator who had experience with residents and staff, myself, and our vice president of HR. And at the end of the workshop, it was the vice president of HR who had people lined up, because we could say anecdotally, and we're still in the process of gathering some of these figures, but we know anecdotally, particularly in some key communities, people are attracted to apply and come work for us because we have this commitment, because they want to bring their authentic selves to work. It's not just about caring for the residents, it's about caring for the staff and everyone in the community.
I think that's such an interesting observation, Beth, and it's interesting that certainly is true, right, for LGBTQ plus folks who are interested in working in the long-term care sector. That providers, communities that have made this commitment are going to be attractive to LGBTQ plus employees. But it's not just members of our community. I've had conversations with heads of different long-term care communities across the country who have observed that they find that it attracts many other kinds of employees as well. People who have or have had loved ones who are members of the LGBTQ plus community and see how they're mistreated sometimes, and really want to work and support someplace that operates in a better way, right? And people who are hoping to work within a community that looks like the kind of community they would like to live in as they age. And so it's a win-win on so many fronts, which is really, really encouraging.
Yeah, I've had people stop by my office after they come to work here, and one person said, when I found out about what you're doing with the LGBTQ plus community, I knew I wanted to work here because my first husband is gay and he's the father of our children. And I know that through my children, they're going to be accompanying him as he ages. And this is something I think I need to know more about. And someone else said, I want to work here because I have a niece who's lesbian. And I want to be able to, with pride, say that I work someplace that is respectful of who you are, even though she's not, looking to be employed by us or whatnot. The other thing is we've had, and this has been part of the concern. Oh my gosh, once you do this, then your community is just going to turn into being, LGBTQ plus people, and it's going to be alienating to everyone else. And it's like, no. What we've seen are For instance, the woman who about a month after she moved into the community went into the chaplain's office and sat down and closed the door. And she said, okay, I live here now. You're now my pastor. You need to know my story. And she proceeded for the next hour telling her life story. And at the end, what she was really getting to is she had moved from another community. And she moved to our community because her youngest son is gay, and he is the one who's going to be predominantly her care provider, her caregiver. And in the previous community where she lived, he did not feel safe walking in that building.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
she said, as soon as I saw that sticker, that rainbow sticker on the door, and I knew that my son can walk in here and be safe, I knew this is where I wanted to live. I kind of call it the outing of the parents. You know,
That's a
and
cool
I say we want people at the dinner table, everyone, to be able to talk about all their children and all of their grandchildren, and not to feel that they're going to be bullied or have to defend. And that does happen. It's not perfect, but at least they know that organizationally they've got the organization behind them that can help support them in setting that culture.
I so appreciate you sharing that story, Beth. And what it makes me think about is the reality that the vast, vast majority of Americans know somebody, have somebody close to them who is LGBTQ plus, either a family member, a close friend, a neighbor. And that means that the vast majority of Americans actually care about LGBTQ plus people and want to see us treated decently and with respect, including as we age. So this isn't about creating some exclusive community at all. It's about creating a community where all of us can see that no matter who you are, no matter who you love, you're going to be supported and celebrated and respected as you age. And I mean, that's the kind of community that most people in our country would like to live in as they get older.
Yeah. So other phone calls that I get are from folks who are associated with other organizations. And there's one individual in Colorado, and she had heard about what we're doing. And we had a couple conversations. So she said, I'm volunteering in this organization, and we've got residents who are out and they have a support group and they want to be doing more. And how do we get our organization to do what you're doing? And through kind of doing some investigation and some deeper conversation with her, come to find out it's a faith-based organization, and it is very much affiliated, as in I think everyone on the board has to be a member of that denomination. And once I heard her name the denomination, I said, theologically, I think you're going to have a really tough time convincing that board that this is what you need to do. What has been your experience in these conversations with other faith-based institutions?
Yeah, so this is a complicated topic. I mean, we have many faith-based providers in the elder care sector. And of course, we have denominations and non-denominational providers who are very welcoming of LGBTQ plus people. And we have others who are not, and they're not for theological reasons. And we have a lot of work to do, frankly, in this space. We have had circumstances which Sage has been directly involved, in which older members of our community have been denied access to, in some cases, what is more or less the only affordable elder care provider in their community for these kinds of reasons. Because in one case in St. Louis, it was an older lesbian couple who were denied access to a faith-based provider because the provider refused to recognize their relationship and said that they would only recognize couples in so-called biblical marriage relationships. And so we have a lot of work to do, and this is some work that Sage is starting to develop now in terms of how can we build dialogue and build bridges of conversation that lead to a space in which a faith-based provider can not give up its religious beliefs and still at the same time recognize that it will have LGBTQ plus older people within its community. And that there has to be a way, and we believe there is a way, in which every provider in this country can provide an elder in their care with the support and care and respect that they need as they age. And that the reason why all of us work in elder care and elder services is because that's what we're trying to do. And so we have these conversations with different providers, with employees within different providers on an ongoing basis. But there is a lot of work to be done in this area. And I think an important part of what needs to happen is that we have to build conversation, build bridges. We live within an extremely polarized country, and polarization and not talking with each other is not going to solve this problem. It's going to result in elders who need care not getting the care they need. So at Sage, we are looking at how can we build more conversation, and how can we help as many faith-based providers as possible in this country, help them provide LGBTQ plus elders with the care that we all deserve as human beings in our old age.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do we get beyond the litmus test of the theological stance of a person's faith tradition, and um, take a step back? And we know that in order for folks to age abundantly, that's what we like to say, for people to thrive, they need to know that they have meaning and purpose. They need to be able to feel safe, and that's both physically and psychologically and spiritually. And from what I have learned on this journey, there are aspects of life experienced by those of you in the LGBT community throughout your lifetime that I have not experienced, have not had to face. But it is really important for me to understand those historical contexts, so that when individuals come into our community, I have that in my background that are more important than the biases and the stereotypes that I might have. And then I can really listen to the individual to be able to meet their needs and know what do we need to do to make this feel like it is your home. And that's what we try to do to every resident.
And it's so essential, and also essential at a very human level, to understand the human cost if you do not make that effort. And I think about an elderly lesbian who was actually Sage's oldest constituent in New York City until she died last summer at the age of 105. And her name is Jerry Calvis. And Jerry had lived on her own, actually, until she was 100 years old. At the age of 100, she went into a facility that was actually run by an organization that comes from her religious community and culture. And actually, interestingly, it's an organization that had done some important work to become more LGBTQ welcoming. The challenge was that Jerry had grown up in an environment in which who she was as a lesbian was not accepted. In fact, Jerry's birth name was Emma. And as an adult, she took on the name Jerry because she felt that it expressed more of who she was. And so after she ended up in this long-term care community, I heard that she was feeling very depressed and very alone. And I went and I met with her, and I asked her what was going on. And she said, and I actually referred to her as Jerry. And she said, "Shh, please, you can only call me Emma here. I don't feel safe being called Jerry. And I'm sad because I miss being in a community that accepts me for who I am." And in that particular circumstance, Jerry had been part of Sage programs in New York City, and we arranged periodically to, take her in medicalized transport to Sage on a number of occasions for gatherings, which lifted her spirits. But we shouldn't have to do that, right? We need to ensure that every environment is one where somebody like Jerry can feel supported and respected and cared for who they are, and not be hiding and not be fearful at that at that age of life. And I believe that that should be the commitment that every care provider makes. And we have work to do to help providers live into that responsibility.
Absolutely. And it's a challenge every day.
Yeah.
um, because it depends, there's so many different people who interact with our residents, and that's again why the educational piece is so important.
Yeah.
um, yeah, and we, statistics research shows that those folks who are closeted or go back into the closet, their quality of life um, is jeopardized, their physical health is jeopardized. And I can tell you anecdotally, within our own family, three brothers, and the two heterosexual brothers lived into their 90s, and barely into 90s, but in their 90s. And their brother, who was closeted gay man, died at 75.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, this is the reality. It is very, very difficult to live a long and healthy life when you feel forced to hide a part
yeah,
of yourself and to
yeah.
make believe that you're something that you're not. And often it ends up translating into a whole variety of challenges, mental health issues, substance abuse issues, which, among other things, shorten your life.
So, what are some of those elements that are needed in the physical as well as the cultural environments in order for LGBTQ folks to feel safe or included, or that they can be authentic? What
Yeah.
are those basic elements that
Yeah.
we need to have to alert people?
Well, as you know, Beth, the Sage Care program and the Long-Term Care Equality Index have a whole array, right, of extensive guidelines and approaches to this work. But I think to simplify it in a way, it's the fundamentally, in many ways, it is the message that gets delivered to an older person who is LGBTQ plus when they come into contact with a long-term care and elder care community. And what has happened historically is that the message that most LGBTQ plus elders receive is that they should hide who they are in this community because they see no evidence that this community is welcoming to them. They see no evidence that this is a community that has them in mind. So, some of the things that can be done that make that different are really not that complicated. I Things as simple as putting a rainbow sticker on a wall or on a door. I was talking to a longtime Sage supporter a couple of weeks ago who is looking at assisted living and is going around and looking at several different assisted living communities. And we were having a conversation, and he talked about the community that he eventually chose. And he said that when he went into the office, into the reception area, that he saw a rainbow sticker on the door, and he said, "My shoulders went down." That he was able to relax because and that one simple thing, right, delivered such an important message to him. Not that this is a perfect community; no community is perfect, but this is a community that is trying to be welcoming to me. So things as simple as those kinds of visible markers of rainbow flags, rainbow stickers, the Sage Care credential, what kind of literature you have on a table, what kind of magazines and newspapers and things like that do you have? Do any of them reflect the lives and realities of LGBTQ plus people? What kind of pictures you have on the walls? Does it just show different sex couples and traditional heterosexual families, or does it actually show folks who are LGBTQ plus as well? All these visible cues, that's the first step in a way, because that is what somebody sees and takes in before they have much of any experience, right, with the staff person, with the activities, etc. It's what they see. What they see if they go to your website, what they see if they are asked to fill out some kind of a form, whether the form presumes makes assumptions about who they are that don't match their lives. For example, if a person is transgender and there is no opportunity on that form to indicate that, if a person has a partner or spouse of the same gender and there is no opportunity on the form to reflect that, right? So all of these basic things that are really not that difficult to change if the will is there, that make a huge difference um, for LGBTQ plus older people in terms of their initial perceptions. And then in addition, as you know, because you all have been through Sage Care and are involved in the LEI, then there are a whole series of practices in terms of activities that can be undertaken within the organization, policy, anti-discrimination policies that should be put in place, different kinds of trainings for employees, the importance of ensuring that all employees are trained. Yeah, we should remember, right, that every person that works for the community that comes into contact with the resident impacts their life. Every person, from the driver of the van to the person who was cleaning their room to the person who was serving food, it's not just a select group of employees. So it's a, once we drill down into the specifics, there are a lot of different kinds of things we have to look at. But it really starts with what is the story that your community is telling to LGBTQ plus elders when they first come into contact with you in that very visceral and visible way.
Just a quick story from our experience. It's part of a larger, more complex story, but a woman was brought into one of our communities directly to a memory care neighborhood, and she was having a rough time. I mean, she was obviously angry and frustrated, and there may have involved throwing a glass of juice at a staff member. And one of the nurse's aides came in the afternoon, and she kind of stepped back and was observing and heard what people had said. And she just kind of had an intuition. There was only one person listed on this person's medical record. It was a woman. And so she went and got our magazine that we publish. And on the back of the magazine and on every edition, there's a little rainbow comma, which is a symbol with the United Church of Christ. And she grabbed one of those because it was close. I mean, we're talking a little rainbow comma. And she held it up to this woman and she said, "You're safe here. Do you see this? You're safe here." And she looked at that and she said, "I'm safe here." And she said, "Yeah, do you see that rainbow? You're safe here." She didn't out her. She didn't, she just thought, there's no harm in just pointing this out. And that was enough to calm her. And however many other staff had been in her presence that day, that little symbol brought to her attention was all she needed.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. It's a great story.
So where do you see hope? We've come a long way over the last 20 years, 18 years since you've been at Sage. We have a long way to go. But where do you see hope? Because there's a lot of fear right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tough stuff going on in our society, in our country, and there's a lot of fear. And at the same time, I see tremendous hope certainly in the work that we're doing and in the opportunities for LGBTQ plus elders. We have made a great deal of progress in terms of the awareness and the openness of providers and elder care communities to working with and respecting LGBTQ plus elders. There's a great deal of interest in programs like Sage Care and the Long-Term Care Equality Index, and that just is growing all the time. And so that gives me a lot of hope. At the same time, we are realistic, and we recognize, sadly, there are forces in this country that are seeking to make LGBTQ plus people and issues some kind of a cultural wedge, some kind of a political weapon, some kind of way of whipping up hope and fear and resentment. That sadly is part of the society in which we live. But we are optimistic at Sage that we can overcome that, because fundamentally, at the end of the day, we're talking about human beings. And we're talking, in the case of Sage, of human beings who've lived their entire lives, who've worked hard, who've made tremendous contributions to their community. And all they are really asking for in their old age is that they be treated with respect, and that they get the same kind of dignity and support and recognition that every other older person in this country gets. And I just have to believe that this country is big enough and open-hearted enough to meet that and to meet that commitment. And so I'm hopeful, and we at Sage are hopeful.
Thank you. Thank you. We could talk for a very long time.
Yes, we could.
And we will have other conversations, I'm sure. But I'm aware that we probably need to bring this to a close. So there's one thing that we like to do as we come to the end of our podcast, ask our guests questions about your own perspectives on aging. So are you ready?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. Before I do that, because we don't want to forget, where can people find you in Sage?
Best way to find Sage is sageusa.org, which is our website, or just Sage USA on our various social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, etc.
Okay. So, ready? Question number 1. When you think about how you've aged, what do you think has changed about you or grown with you that you really like about yourself?
I think maybe the thing that's grown in me that I really like is that I've developed much more of an appreciation for the nuance and complexity of life. When I was younger, I tended to see things much more in black and white. My husband, who is Presbyterian, tells me, but that was my Catholic upbringing. That I don't know if that's really the case, but it is true that I used to see things in much more binary ways, one or the other. And I've just come to understand over life that often things are a lot more complicated and nuanced than that.
Thank you. Now, question number 2. What has surprised you most about you as you've aged?
I think that maybe one of the things that surprised me, and I kind of got a sense of this during COVID, but I continue to get a sense of it as we're emerging from it, is I've been really surprised as I get older and how much joy and peace I find in being at home, whether it's alone or with my partner, and not doing anything, just chilling out. I'm a very energetic person, and I've always kind of been somebody who's always on the move and always doing something, and a long list of things to do next. And I'm just so surprised to see how happy it can make me sometimes to do nothing. And so that's been a real revelation for me. And I think it's kind of convenient, since I do believe that there is some value in slowing down a little bit from time to time as we get older.
Yeah, I can't remember who it is that talks about this, but that one of the changes that happens between adulthood and moving into elderhood is moving away from the feeling that we have to do, and in being able to be, and understanding the importance of being. Yeah. Okay. Last question, number 3. Is there someone you've met or who's been in your life that has set a good example for you in aging, someone that inspires you to age abundantly?
Well, I only met her one time, but I feel like I've met her many times because I've been a huge fan, and she's definitely my role model in getting old and getting older, and that's Joan Baez. I'm just mesmerized by how she has aged in such a beautiful way, and just become, I don't know, I just feel like, wiser and more full of light with every year. I've always loved her music, but I just saw a documentary about her life that was made just a couple of years ago. I think she's 82 years old now. And I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do as I get older. So she's my role model in that regard.
And that's how you know when you have an abundant aging influencer, when you say, I want to be like that person when I'm their age.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michael, and our listeners for listening to this episode of The Art of Aging, part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from United Church Homes. And we want to hear from you. What's changed about you as you've aged that you love? What has surprised you most? And how do you define abundant aging? And who is your abundant aging influencer or hero? Join us at www.abundantagingpodcast.com to share your ideas. You can also give us feedback when you visit the Ruth Frost Parker Center website at www.unitedchurchhomes.org/Parker-Center. And Michael, tell us one more time, where can people find you?
www.sageusa.org.
Thank you very much for your time. And this has just been lovely.
That's been great. Thank you so much, Beth.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.